All right, everybody, welcome to another Digital Dungeon Master stream. This beautiful man in front of you is the one and only iconic Bruce Hurd. Uh, I I can't tell you how excited I am to have you on, Bruce. I've been a very incognito fan of yours for a long time, and I've been following you on Twitter for years, and I've sent you some messages in the past and stuff saying, thanks for what you've done for the industry and everything. And I can't tell you how happy I am to have you on. So welcome, Bruce. I really appreciate you coming on. So
Well, good. That makes two of us.
yeah, we're a little bit late. I was having some technical difficulties, so you guys can put all that on me because I know that you guys have been waiting for the interview. So, Bruce, we'll get right into it. So, when you got into role playing games and Dungeons and Dragons, how did you get into this beautiful hobby that we love?
Oh, in a roundabout way. I used to really enjoy building plastic models, like airplanes, stuff like that, when I was a kid. So when I went on vacation in the U.S., I couldn't find what I was looking for. Instead, I saw this box that had a really nice Messerschmitt 109 diving. It said Luftwaffe on it. I figured, oh, this is interesting. What is this? The lady at the counter said, oh, it's very complicated. You don't want to buy this. And I said, yeah, I want to buy it. When it's got an airplane on it, I want to buy it. Give me. So she said, oh, okay, fine. So I bought that, and I figured, oh, okay, it's some kind of game. Okay, yes, I know what this is. This is a war game. I loved it. It was really complicated. It took me forever to figure it out, especially since my English at the time wasn't particularly good. It certainly wasn't as extensive as what I have now. Immediately, I went back to the store and bought Panzerblitz. That's another one. Went back to France, played the heck out of these two games, and I started looking around for ways of buying more of these. So I became this total war game nut. And because I was a war game nut, I got interested in history, especially military history.
Oh yeah,
including medieval history. Anyway, I ended up going back to the States in 1980, and I went looking for more war games. And instead, I found a D&D basic set, the Holmes version, the big,
the blue box with the big dragons.
No, it's the big box, the really thick one. It's about an inch thick.
Gotcha.
It's got a I think it's gray. I can't remember. Anyway, I opened that up, and I kind of figured it's some kind of a single shooter kind of game. Didn't quite understand the concept of role play, so I set it aside. Went back to France. Ended up going to Paris for a job there, and went looking for a wargame club. Didn't find one, but I got roped into a D&D club in Paris, and of course, it was all D&D. And I loved it. I figured, oh yeah, this is for me. Let's set aside all the war game and let's play this stuff. So what had happened after that, went back to Nice, my hometown, down in the Mediterranean. And I get this phone call from the editor-in-chief of a fanzine in Paris. I happened to be writing articles for the fanzine because I loved the game so much. And he told me, hey, Bruce, actually, I'd met him at that particular club. That's how we got to know each other. And he said, "Hey, Bruce, would you be interested in going back to the States to work with TSR?" I said, "Yeah."
Do I need to think about that? Really?
Well, sure. Doing what exactly? He said, "Well, French translations." Oh, okay. I hated translations. I said, fine. Okay. What do we do? She says, well, I'll set up an appointment and we can arrange things for you. And sometime later, I flew back up to Paris and ended up meeting with Gary Gygax at his hotel room. And Gary was really a lot of fun to talk to. He was very relaxed. And he had all the games that were coming out. That was, 1980, late 82? So he had BX, he had Gangbusters, Boot Hill, all of that stuff, and he was proudly showing all this stuff to me, saying, "This is everything we've got, and this is really cool." And I'm like starstruck in the middle of that, like, holy cow!
Yeah.
So the conversation went, and sure, we can hire you. You can do freelance. French translations. So we made some quick arrangements, and that seemed fine to me. I ended up going to a convention with the TSR folks at Nuremberg. They had a toy fair. So I got to meet a few more people there, went back to Nice, started working at home on my little Underwood typewriter. Portable typewriter is what I was working on. And I think I translated a Star Frontiers module first. I had a devil of a time trying to come up with all the technical terms. And eventually I get a call back from Lake Geneva, and they're telling me, we can't have you working out of your home in France. You're going to have to move over to Lake Geneva. Okay, well, I'm used to traveling, so no problem. Pack up all my stuff, put all the war games, and a few clothes, but a lot of war games. All of my D&D stuff, of course. That was in a big metal trunk, with 2 big padlocks. Shipped that over to Lake Geneva. I got there in February. Now, this is me coming out of Nice, on the French Riviera, where it's kind of like Southern California. It's
I was going to say, you go from Nice to like Lake Geneva.
There be palm trees here, So So I'm flying over to Lake Geneva. It's just freaking cold. So that was an experience, even though I had traveled several times to the States. Discovering Lake Geneva in the winter, that was interesting. And that's really how I got to start with TSR as a French translator.
Wow.
I have a dual citizenship. My dad's American. My mom's French, and I was born in France. So that made things very, very easy for me to move to the States and get settled in Lake Geneva. Yeah. There was no legal problem or anything like that.
The snow capital of the world, probably one of the snow capitals of the world.
Well, we don't get really that much snow, but sometimes it gets really cold.
Yeah.
Especially back then. It's not quite as bad now with climate change, but back in the early '80s. Boy, we had some days where like 15 below with high winds.
Yeah. A couple of years ago, I moved to El Paso, Texas, and I was living in Central Florida at the time. So I got beach to the right of me, beach to the left of me, sunshine. And then I come to the desert, and then there's no rain, no green, no trees. It's all dirt, but there's no humidity. So I'll take that. And no hurricanes, by the way. No hurricanes. Because I would have to deal with a hurricane every year in Florida. So when you were, you got your foot into the door at TSR, you were doing French translations. I never knew that. That's awesome. So you started doing more. I'm sure you started doing more and more of the company, because I know that you've done Gazetteers, you've done modules, you've done, one of my favorite books you put together, the Wondrous Inventions book, and which is a unique book. That is something that just blew my mind the first time I opened it up, and I'm like, this is definitely not D&D stuff, but this is amazing. So after you started doing French translations, was there another team that started taking it over for you, and you started doing other projects? So what all roles did you have at TSR?
Oh, it was a whole lot more brutal. What happened is, after about maybe a year, not even a year at TSR, they started firing people. So here I am. Yeah. I flew from France. I started working here for several months, and then I'm laid off. Oh, great.
Oh, no.
What am I going to do now? So here I am in the middle of nowhere, Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Woohoo!
Going cow tipping.
Right, exactly. What am I going to do? And I was lucky. Really, I was twice at the right place at the right time. They needed somebody to take care of freelance acquisitions, that is, managing contracts, hiring outside contributors for the games department. And Harold Johnson was in charge of the games department at the time, and he knew I was I had a knack for being well organized and hardworking, and not really paying attention. I mean, there could be a tornado, and the walls could be falling around me, and I'd be kind of staring at my computer working, completely unaware of what's going around me. That kind of stuck to me throughout. But so I was rehired, and I started dealing with freelancers and whatnot. Well, that was about 84. TSR went through a lot of problems. Especially as regards who owned the company. And so very soon, Gary was out of the picture, and Frank Manser, who was the anchor, literally, for the basic set, expert, the revision, both of them had to leave the company. And there was absolutely nobody on staff that knew anything about the basic set or the expert set or any of the other sets. They just weren't working with Frank. He was kind of on his own, doing all this stuff, and the rest of the creative staff was focused on AD&D. That's all they did. So they had to freelance all of this stuff, all of the modules for basic D&D. All of that stuff had to go out. So it had to go through me. So here I am, knowing AD&D First Edition, absolutely perfect. I knew all the details, all the nuts and bolts, and now I have to work with basic D&D, and I'm like, oh, shoot. So I have to relearn everything in order to really understand what I'm dealing with, in order to freelance all that work to outside contributors. Well, because of that, I became the default person, the new anchor person at TSR to deal with anything related to basic and expert, because there was nobody else. So by default, I became the product manager on top of being the head of acquisitions.
Wow. And probably at this time, I would imagine second edition was probably in the process of being created too, wasn't it? Because I think it came out at 85, 86-ish or something like that.
Just about, yep.
Oh my goodness. So, that's one thing that I always wondered about, Bruce. I'm like, why? Because now Wizards of the Coast is, okay, we've got this D&D Next, which was 5e at the time. We're not worried about 4th edition anymore. And they just basically threw 4th edition to the side, even though they had a bunch of products for 4th edition and their essentials kind of 4th edition revisited. So I could just imagine how difficult it was to have first edition, which was probably the starship of the company at the time, working on second edition, and basic D&D. So, and I'm thankful for that, because I am a huge basic D&D fan and I have everything. But man, that had to be so hard to run all, both of the lines, and in second edition, oh my goodness, that must have been an absolute train wreck for you. I mean, from a logistical standpoint of trying to get everything, But I mean, you said you were organized, so I mean,
right.
You probably didn't have that much of a problem.
Second edition didn't really hit me that hard anyway, or even first edition, because most of these products were written in-house.
Yeah.
Which didn't involve me. I was on the team, mostly listening into the discussions behind putting together second edition together. I wasn't contributing anything because it wasn't my place to contribute anything, but I sat there listening to the logic behind changing one thing or another, and eventually coming up with second edition. So at least I knew what I was heading into. But it took a long time before AD&D stuff started rolling my way, because the stuff was we just didn't have enough people in house to produce all of the stuff that TSR wanted.
Yeah. Wow.
But again, at this point, I was organized in such a way that I always had either an in-house designer or an in-house editor to get a draft from a freelancer for an AD&D product to verify that the material was right. I didn't do that.
Yeah.
I only did it for basic D&D. Otherwise, I'd go raving nuts. It's just work. I mean, the volume of stuff. Can you imagine?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, just the sheer amount of content. I mean, the basic Dungeons and Dragons line alone has 155 products, and that's really nothing compared to first edition. And then second edition was just out of control with the amount of content.
It was out of control. I mean, they went way overboard with this, and that caused a lot of problems in the long run.
Yeah.
But at least the silver lining of all this for me is because I had such a handle over D&D, I started replacing what I used to enjoy in first edition and channel that into basic D&D, and that resulted into the Gazetteers.
Yeah.
Because I like history, because my background as a European guy, that's where I was raised, that's mostly what my culture is about. I like history, I like color, I like detail. And I looked at the stuff we were doing, and I figured, no, I want something that has a little bit more meat on it. So that was my first battle with the management at TSR, middle management, not upper management. They weren't involved with that. I had to, well, the first Gazetteer came out as a 64-page product, which was really sweet. The first two, actually. These were really sweet. Aaron Nelson did a fantastic job with Gaz 1, and it's still today seen as the flagship of the Gazetteers. Everybody loves that Gazetteer.
And that's the image that you have up beside you on the screen.
That's right.
Grand Duchy of Karamika's GAZ1.
That's right. It's the one. Gaz 2 was also a 64-pager. That was written by Ken Rolston. I had the luxury of picking the absolute best authors I could get my hands on to do the Gazetteers. That made a huge difference. Yeah. When you launch a product line like that, you want to have the absolute best writers. So I was able to do that. Then I analyzed these two, and I figured, okay, I want to do something a little bit more than that. So I had to argue with the management. That's where the pressure came when I said, I really would rather see a 96-page product rather than a 64, because there are more things you can do that way. So that scared a few people, but eventually they said, okay, fine, but you're going to make sure this works out. I said, okay, I'll write it. I'll go ahead and write it.
Gas 3 was Gallantry, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right. That was Gas 3.
Yeah.
So I figured, all right, I need to do this safely and well, which means time. So I scheduled it way late as a release in order to give me all the time possible, because that was a huge project for me. Yeah. I only had written 32 pages before, a couple of them. That's it.
Yeah.
So a 96 was, but, you know, being young and dumb, I went ahead and did it, and it turned out pretty good. A lot of people liked it, and that pretty much set the tone for all of the following Gazetteers.
Yeah, because I remember the first couple of Gazetteers, they didn't have the player material. So, but the Gazetteers introduced the general skill check system, because that was not in Basic and Expert. Although weapon mastery was added in the black box, you know, the master box set, and then general skill. So was that, I always wondered this, was the general skills your brainchild? Because you had just mentioned that you were trying to incorporate more advanced D&D stuff into basic D&D. And
yeah, that wasn't my brainchild. I can't remember where I got it from, but that wasn't my idea. That was already said someplace else. And I looked at that and I figured, this is perfect for basic D&D. It's very simple. It's based on ability scores. Yeah. And we need something to fill the void for all the little things that are not included in the general mechanics.
Yeah.
So I put that in there, and everybody grabbed onto that and started throwing their own skills in the various Gazetteers, including some things that were, quite frankly, very AD&D-like. And that I didn't even see. I mean, there was so much stuff going through my desk, going across my desk, I should say. There are a lot of little things like that got through the filter, let's put it this way, that shouldn't have. But
It
People
was
roll with the
definitely
punch. They
needed.
didn't care.
Yeah, especially when you have the sheer amount of stuff that you were in control of. I mean, yeah. But the skill check system was definitely needed because basic is as advertised. It is a very basic game. You basically just swing a weapon and that's it. It's not like games now where you have power strike and cleave strike and all these other shouts and auras. And so yeah, the weapon mastery and general
And
skills just rounded the game out perfectly for me.
I just really love the first couple of box sets because they do such a good job at explaining the concept of role playing, which is such a tough thing to get across to people who have no idea.
And a lot of games don't do that nowadays. They don't spend much time. They spend more time on the tactical side of, combat, but the role playing part, yeah, basic D&D did a great job with that.
Yeah. So, I enjoyed it. Over the years, I got so attached to D&D. I looked at first edition and said, yeah, okay, I can play that. It's a mess. I hate reading through it.
Oh, it was so unorganized. It was a hot mess, big time. Yeah.
But even, I have nothing but respect and admiration for Gary, but his writing style sometimes was just awful. Sometimes going through the DMG, it's written in tiny type.
Yeah.
It's big blocks of text, and you're going through this, and what does that actually mean? I don't understand this sentence, Sometimes I went over and over and over this stuff, and it's like, this doesn't mean anything. It was full of stuff like that. In basic, you go through the basic and expert, it's crystal clear.
Yeah, it is. It's very cut and that's why I've always gone back and played that throughout the years, because you just don't have to worry about all of the other mechanics that first edition thrown in. And well, not really first, the games are really similar to one another, but second edition, that was second edition, it's all the THACO line, but yeah, basic was just so much easier to play, and it did concentrate more on role playing, I thought.
True. Yes, I agree. One of the things that happened once Gas 3 got out, it kind of set a standard for the Gazetteers to such a degree that the other design teams handling AD&D, Forgotten Realms, Greyhawk, all those game worlds, looked at that and figured, we need to do the same thing.
Oh, they did? Yeah, for sure, yeah.
And they followed up with their own approaches and whatnot, so that was cool. But that was an influence that I never intended to take place. It surprised me when people said, yeah, we need to do stuff like this. And I'm going, oh, right, they weren't doing this.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm fine with that.
I was already hooked on, I was telling you this before we went live, but, I was already hooked on D&D. 84, I started playing D&D. Saw some kids playing down in the tires on the playground. They were building castles with these spider, mud, water-infested big bad tractor tires. I was hooked. But the Gazetteer, the first time that I picked up, it was in Walden's books, and I got the Karamikos, and somebody had taken it out of the wrapper because those Gazetteers came in wrappers. And I opened up the Gazetteer, and when I saw this, Specularum and all these other maps, and I saw general skills, and then I just started seeing all the different types of information, key players, and, here's how the social status is. And I was just like, man, that really took me to being a huge fan to like being addicted to D&D, because I was like, Mom, I got to have this $10 book, and she bought it for me, and I just couldn't put the book down. And the Gazetteers are my favorites of D&D.
Yeah, and they're hard to resist, especially the first one, because with Clyde Caldwell's cover art and Stephen Fabian's internal illustrations that set a particular taste, particular atmosphere, they're really nice looking products.
Yeah.
Especially in what was 84, 85 when he came out. When was the first one that came out?
About 84ish, I think, 83ish, 84ish. I was still able to get them up until 91 and 92. You could still special order those and still find them, because I've got 14 and 15 Altru's, I think the Native Americans. I still have that, and I never opened it up because I was just working too much. But I always kept buying that stuff, though.
When you compare something like Gaz 1 to other products that predated it by maybe just a year, 2 years, they looked really schlocky.
Yeah. And a lot of the other games, there was no information on the area, like B1, Search of the Unknown, B2, Keep on the Borderlands. You had no clue where these adventures took place. But when the Expert box set came out, it started talking about the known world, and that was the first time that the known world was there. And then you saw, then I saw the Karamikos, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this Karamikos book is part of the box set. I remember, and then when I opened it up and saw Specularum, I'm like, oh, I gotta have this book, because here's a big 64-page book on nothing but what I just saw in the Expert box set. So, I was hooked.
Exactly. I'm so glad that Frank put that in the Expert set, because it was really literally a hook. Even though it makes no sense whatsoever, it was a perfect hook for all of those products, because now we have we have a paragraph of information on each country, maybe a little bit of information on Threshold and Karamikos, but it's bare bones. So it's perfect. All you have to do is just take each of those countries and develop them separately.
I always thought it was based off of, European history and European, feudalism and stuff like that. I mean, a lot of those Gazetteers, there's the Asians with Genghis Khan and stuff like that. I mean, he's on the cover basically. I mean, it's awesome. So there's roughly about 1,500 pages of Gazetteer information for the known world. I mean, that is just an unsurmountable amount of content to run a game and have all of the information. And I would imagine you probably had more books that you wanted to do that just probably weren't done. Yeah,
I wanted to do the Helldown Freeholds as the Helldanic Knights colony, and I wanted to expand further. I mean, we did the Hollow World, we did the trail maps, we did Creature Crucibles, but that's not world expansion. That's really player character expansion. And then the problem with this, we came out with an awful lot of Gazetteers in a very short period of time, and in retrospect I'm looking at that and I figured, I wish we had spread those out a little bit more, because I think that kind of flooded the market. Some people really liked them and bought them all the time and were screaming for more. But really, with everything else that TSR was putting out, it kind of bled the market dry, I think. And it got to
You mean just as D&D as a whole?
Yeah.
Bled the market?
Too many. See, the problem is you have a finite number of people buying AD&D, D&D, etc. So when you do what I do, what I did with the Gazetteers, but you also have to realize that there are another 4 groups of creatives that are coming up with stuff for Greyhawk, stuff for Dragon Lance, and Ravenloft, and Forgotten Realms, and on Dark Sun. This keeps subdividing your customer base into smaller and smaller pieces. So it became harder and harder and harder to sell all of these really very good products, but it's too difficult to sell them now. And what happened with the Gazetteers, there's also another effect, is that when you go up in numbers, Gaz 1, Gaz 2, Gaz 3, okay, you're fine. You get to 7, 8, 9, there's product fatigue that is starting to settle in. You get to 14, 15, I mean, nobody does that.
No.
It's really because the Gazetteers are really cool products that were able to get to such a high number. But it's kind of like cannibalizing itself, if I can describe it like that.
Well, you mentioned, I think what also helped was you mentioned the authors. I mean, you had Greenwood and a host of others doing these. He did the 5 Shires. So you knew every time I saw a new Gazetteer coming out, and you're right, I think it was like a 3 or 4 year period where it was just Gazetteer after Gazetteer, but I didn't mind that because
every quarter there was one coming out.
Yeah.
It's like a magazine, a quarterly.
But you knew what to expect, You know, you knew that you were going to get the 64-page, GM's book with all of the information for that region. You knew you were going to get the 32-page book. And my favorite, what surprised me, I love the Orcs of Thor, and that was the book that really introduced multiple races into the game, because you could play a bugbear, you could play an orc, you could play a troll, and it was amazing. And there was also a game with the chit sheet and I still have the chit sheet that I never punched out any of the game pieces. So not only did you get the player's guide, you got the GM's book, but you also got like a small little board game to go along with that too. And that was but the Orcs of Thor, I loved that. And I remember the Chieftain Thor came down. We were in our mid-level 15s. I think we're in our mid-teens. And we had just started getting into strongholds, and we had our lands, and we had commerce going. We were trading with the other strongholds around, and then we had went on an adventure, sort of like Zelagar and Rogan in B1. In search of we go and we never come back, and when we come back, the Orcs of Thor had destroyed all of our lands, and they had encroached from the north. I was so mad at my DM for that. And then we had to play hell getting everything back, but that's part of D&D, right?
That's right. You forgot the manual of the warrior.
Oh yeah, that's right. The little paper, the little paperback one. Yeah, it's like a little pamphlet.
Winter.
Yeah.
I remember once I barged into Steve Winter's office, and he was just giggling at something. I had no idea what he was doing. And then I kind of looked over his shoulder. He was going through the orc manual of warriors, just shaking his head. Yeah, right. Sorry, I've been a little silly there. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, the Warlord Thor was someone that you did not want to mess with. We had to do a couple resurrections that day, needless to say, when we started trying to take back our castles and all of our land. But that led into
you can't keep the orcs as just the one hit die creature that everybody beats up very easily, etc. No, I turned around and said, okay, their boss is going to be really tough. So okay, I'm gonna make vampire and I don't know what else I put in there, high level, whatnot, and he was very tough, and of course the idea that you could have orcs with multiple hit dice meant that the orcs all of a sudden become very dangerous.
Yeah,
that's what.
And they just weren't that one hit dice plus one creature anymore, but it was awesome because this book enabled us to play from the bad guy's point of view, and we could just go and raid human towns and settlements. And so we were starting to play, the orcs and the goblins and the bugbears and the ogres. And so that was, the Orcs of Thor. That is that book and the Wondrous Inventions book. Those are my two favorite books. And I also love Gallantry too, and I had mentioned this before we went live. I loved how, because you did Gazetteer 3 and the Thor, and I always remembered you would reference the two books together. So I did like that, how you would, in Thor you would kind of chime in with Gazetteer 3 Gallantry and stuff. So. Yeah.
Well, they were adjacent, so there was no choice. I had to do it.
Yeah.
And I don't think that Darrican was out. That was the next one, I think. Gaz 11, wasn't that Darrican?
Yeah, I think it was, yeah.
So I couldn't reference the Darrican because it didn't exist yet.
Yeah. I always thought Darrican was sort of like a module based on France. Is that
Originally, when I talked to Scott, I told him that I wanted to see a development of Italy, the various powers in late medieval Italy with the merchant and the bankers and all that stuff. He took it from there and went ahead and did his thing, and that's it. That's Darrican.
Yeah, there's 1,500 pages of content. It's just amazing. So, when you're sorry, I could talk about the Gazetteers. I love the Gazetteer line. So I'm glad that you guys pushed all those out because they're actually I've looked and they're actually pretty rare to find now, especially in a complete state. So I'm glad I thank my mom all the time for buying me that stuff.
Well, yeah, no kidding. A lot of them are available in PDF form on DM's Guild on DTRPG. Some of them actually you can actually purchase POD, print on demand. But unfortunately, they don't have the whole collection, so that's too bad.
I have you know what? I have an extra Elves. If you need an Elves, I'll send it to you because I have an extra one. And I have an extra box set, too. The Theodos box set. So if you need those, they're yours and I'll send them to you. So.
No, I'm fine. Well, thank you very much. That's very kind of you. No, I'm fine. I have those, so I'm okay. The things that I'm missing, actually, are the Creature Crucibles. I think they're in a garage someplace. I have a bunch of stuff in storage, and I think they're in one of the mini boxes piled up in there.
Yeah, that was part of the Challenger series, the Creature Crucibles, and that talks all about, it's all about nothing but character customization, which there wasn't a lot of in basic D&D. Although I will say the Gazetteers definitely helped with that.
Well, they started that.
Yeah.
The Gazetteers, especially Orcs of Thor.
Sure. Yeah.
It started the idea that you could play monsters as PCs. And after that, I figured, all right, well, if we're going to do that with Gas 10, why not create a series of products that study, that delves into that particular topic? So we had 4 of them?
4 of them, yep. 4 total creature Crucibles, yeah. I think 3 of them were in the Challenger series and then 1 wasn't or something like that. I didn't know if that was a reprint or, a goof up or what.
No, it wasn't. It's just a question of timing. I think the idea that we needed a separate brand for the Rule Cyclopedia and all products that plugged, obviously, into the Rule Cyclopedia, in order to set them apart from the basic set, the expert set, the introduction sets. Because obviously, once you get into the Rule Cyclopedia, you're talking experienced players. They already know about role-playing. They don't need to be taught role-playing. The RC is basically just a reference set. You're already talking to a different type of gamer at this point. So upper management wanted to kind of separate a little bit the introductory stuff from the experienced gaming. Let's put it this way. But that's still not AD&D.
Yeah.
Very awkward.
Do you think, looking back at it, do you think that it wasn't such a great idea to continue with basic first and second edition at the same time?
Well, that was hard to avoid because at the beginning there were legal issues about who exactly got royalties from what. Yeah. There was Arneson, the co-creator of D&D, who was getting, I think he was getting some royalties from basic D&D up to a certain point anyway. But for legal reasons, they had to maintain the basic D&D and everything related to that. And on the other hand, the AD&D, which was clearly related to Gary Gygax, and had nothing, apparently, legally speaking, had nothing to do with Arneson. That's kind of the way they set it up. And once this was in place, well, the company kept going. You see, the problem, TSR really never had the sort of creative vision at a large scale. Everybody was managing their product line, but there wasn't really an overarching vision that could really make things go in a very coherent manner. So getting rid of basic D&D, for example, or blending everything into AD&D, or any kind of, that sort of large-scale thinking never permeated the general direction among the creative staff, or certainly among upper management.
Wow.
So once those paths were created, they just kept going. And nobody asked the question, what are we doing here? Why are we having 2 different D&Ds that have different mechanics.
Competing with one another, basically.
And they're essentially competing with each other. And here's me, on top of that, making the problem worse, actually, by coming up with stuff like the Gazetteers that sold very well, but they were kind of squished between basic D&D and AD&D. There were experience gaming for basic D&D. I mean, come on, I'm starting to have a headache here. This makes no sense whatsoever, but that's the way TSR worked. Wow. There was a lot of that going on.
So, you mentioned about all this stuff coming across your desk, What kind of timelines did you have for, conception to printing and getting it out to the different, vendors to sell?
Right. Well, first off, we had a main distributor that was Random House. That was essentially one distributor. Mm-hmm. In order to sell stuff to Random House, you have to plot well in advance, at least a year in advance, what exactly you're going to release during what month, in order for them to set their budget on a monthly basis, which means everything had to be put in a catalog, and this thing was non-negotiable. It's in the catalog. It has to come in. It has to be made available to the public on the month that we said we would go ahead and release it. Because if you don't, then the distributor has all this money available for us, but no product. So what are they going to do? They're going to turn around and go buy a product from another company. Yeah. And this module or this Gazetteers or this book that you wanted to sell, if it comes out a month later, well, there's no money to buy it. It's dead. You can throw it away. Right? Mm-hmm. So that meant, from a creative standpoint, we had to work essentially a year and a half ahead of schedule in order to have enough time to do all the concept work. What exactly are we going to put on the schedule? What are these products? What do they look like? How do they fit together? What's the general strategy behind each of those product lines? Make your presentations to upper management. Get buy-in from sales marketing, because, well, they have to sell all this stuff, so they have a say, obviously, in this. And then I had to sit down, and that's another job that I got on top of the first two. That was to manage production schedules, so I was juggling 3 jobs. I had to sit with the director of the games department to schedule all of those products. By then, we knew exactly what the contents were: how many pages, how many maps. Is this a box set? Is this just a loose booklet? A loose cover booklet, whatever. So we had all this information. So he and I had to sit and figure out exactly what we're going to assign to whom and how much has to go out of house, because we don't have enough staff in house to do everything. So we worked out a basic schedule for a year's worth of products. Then I go back to my office and put everything on the computer and find all the mistakes, all the omissions. I had a dedicated scheduling software to do that. Otherwise, it'd be impossible. You couldn't do it with just pencil and paper, which is the way they used to do it, by the way, before I took over. So once we had that, we had this very rough rule of thumb that it would take a designer a month calendar to write a 32-page section of something. It depends. If it's a very simple adventure, yeah, okay, maybe. If it's something more complicated that has a lot of rules, a month for 32 pages is just not going to hold, especially at the point size we were writing stuff at the time. The pages were, you look at the Gazetteers, this is like, what, 900 words a page? Yeah. That's a lot of words. So schedules were really busy, were really tight at TSR. And part of that was because management was trying to keep costs down. So I was kind of caught between upper management trying to tell me, squeeze as much time out of all these projects as you can, but being a creative myself, knowing what goes into those products, I had to interface with the creatives and somehow find a medium to balance everything out. So A month per 32-page section, yeah, that was very tough, very demanding for all of the creatives, certainly, to produce all this stuff. About as much time was needed for the editors, who spend that time doing text edit for sure, but they had to babysit the product through all the other layers of production, dealing with the artists, the art department, if most of the internal art was farmed out.
Yeah.
So they had to deal with that. Dealing with typesetting. I mean, we didn't have any desktop publishing at the time. That didn't exist. We didn't even have internet back in the
Yeah. I was going to say, it was probably all done through either mail, correspondence, or probably faxing, right?
Yes. So when we had to actually put the book together, we had to use a typesetting department that produced strips of text, and then the keyliner would cut all that and put it on a board, a storyboard, which is this hard cardboard thing with the columns already all marked. So all you have to do is cut your strips of paper, like old style newspapers, and cut your illos and all that, and do a photo ready, a camera ready board that was copied optically, in order to produce eventually what we call blues, for black and white material, blueprints, or chromolins. The chromes are basically pictures of anything that used color. So an outside cover required a chromolin from the printer. So that's what happened. So the editors had to, of course, coordinate all of this stuff with all the various departments. Eventually, that went to a purchasing department, and they handed over all of this material to print vendors, because TSR did not own their own printers. So they had to farm out all the production to private printers all over the state. And of course, they would take a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, depending on how busy they were. They would come back with the blueprints and the chromes, because they're the ones that did that using their optical equipment. So we had to rush down to the purchasing department and verify all the chromes and the blueprints inch square by inch square visually. Well, yeah, because with an optical system, sometimes you get stuff that gets in the way. It's just some little defects. Sometimes there are mistakes. There are mistakes, but they're mistakes. So take a big red wax pen or a marker, and you just circle the mistake and say, okay, sorry, we misspelled that. That needs to be fixed. That's on the cover. We can't afford to let that go that way. So that all goes back to the printer. They make the correction, bring it back for final approval. So yeah, that's another layer. It takes about a month dealing with printers in general before they can just print the stuff and ship it back to TSR to be assembled. Because of course the products don't come from, the cover might come from one place, the book comes from another, the maps come from, so these are all produced at different times. So all of that stuff is shipped back to TSR. TSR had in their warehouse an assembly department whose role was to put the books inside the covers, and the covers inside the boxes, and the poster maps inside the boxes, close the boxes, shrink wrap the boxes, and then somebody at the end would pick up all that stuff and put it in big boxes and, put it on trucks, whatever.
Too bad there wasn't print on demand back then, huh? Where they took care of all of that.
Well, that's too expensive anyway. You can't do it that way.
Yeah.
You have to do print runs. So the time to do just a 32-page module, if you squeeze everything together and everything is done immediately after the previous department is done with it, you would need at least 4 months, 5 months. So that's why you have to work a year ahead, a year and a half ahead, to do all the concept work, all the design, all the production, printing, and eventually distribution, and still hit the target for your distributors so they can spend their money exactly when we said they should.
Yeah. Wow.
And we did that 99% of the time.
I know that I had James Ward on a couple of weeks ago, and he told me that I guess one of the higher ups was wanting to create dice in house, and James was in charge of getting the dice. and they had to order them from China 3 to 4 months out. And he said that whoever was in charge of making the dice, he says they look like little pieces of tinfoil with numbers on them. And he said they were horrible. And then he said Gary just finally came to him and said, "Look, you got to get these dice because logistics are important." And it's like, you mentioned you have all these pieces that are trying to go together, and I didn't know that. I kind of figured that they were probably assembled somewhere, but I didn't know that you guys actually assembled them there at the TSR massive
some
office
things we
that you
did,
guys
for
had.
example, the collectible cards, like Spellfire and whatnot. We didn't assemble that. That came directly from the printer because they had to sort out, mix the cards because it's all supposed to be random.
Yeah.
Put them in little packets and seal the packets. Put those in special display boxes, and then take those boxes and pack them into larger cartons and ship. So we didn't do that, fortunately. And I'm so glad that Jim was the one who was dealing with the dice because, oh my God, what a horror story.
Yeah, he told me that story, and I was like, he says that's why they had to put chit sheets with numbers, and I actually have one of those chit sheets. And he's like, wow, he's like, you got something that's really rare because we only had those for about 3 or 4 months till our dice started coming back in. So
yeah. When I saw the documents they were working from, and discussions went on about this, that, and the other thing, I used to quietly walk away because if I'm not there, they won't rope me into this nightmare, of which I want nothing. So I just stayed the heck away from Spellfire and dice and all that stuff because it's like, oh my God, I don't want to be involved with that. My life is screwy enough as it is with my 3 jobs. I don't want to have to do anything about these things.
And you're still doing French translations during all of this as well?
Nope.
Or no?
Nope.
Wow.
I did French translations for a year until I was laid off. And then when I came back, I did, as I said, I was in charge of acquisition. And soon after that, within a year of that, I was pretty much the D&D guy.
Wow.
And within a year of that, I started doing all of the scheduling. And that included day-to-day project tracking because you have so many people involved. Every single day, you have to get a status update from everybody because things change all the time. Plus, you have management that's switching products around or adding products in the middle of something. So I had to really take care of the day-to-day nitty-gritty of who was doing what, when, and how much time they needed to do it. But I also had to take care of long-term scheduling, and that's product scheduling, especially as regarded delivery to the printers, because that was critical for the company. You miss products there, you're basically killing the company.
Yeah. So
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. No, you go ahead.
There was a time when Lorraine Williams wanted a friend of hers to take over scheduling. I don't know. This other gal, she was even more of a control freak than I am, and I'm already pretty OCD and pretty controlling to begin with. She was way worse than me, and she happened to be a friend of Lorraine, so great. So she ended up, one day I got a phone call from upper management, and they're telling me, Bruce, we're going to have to take scheduling from you. That's going to go to so-and-so. And I'm like, huh, what? Oh, okay, well, whatever. I was still busy enough that it didn't bother me. They didn't fire me. They didn't dock my pay. I just had less work. Oh, cool. Okay, well, less work. I'm not going to worry about this. Snicker, 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 because I knew what kind of ball of wax that was. And it went very badly.
Did they come back to you and say, would you mind taking the scheduling back over?
Oh, did they ever. It got really bad. The gal who was doing this really didn't have the software to do it right anyway, to begin with, and I knew that. So at one point, we were just laughing in the creative among the creatives because she had taken this huge sheet of paper that covered a wall that was 30 foot long, and she had this big calendar with multiple columns for all of the projects at TSR and all of the various steps needed from concept all the way down to delivery to the printer. And what she did was put little post-it notes for each of those products, and she would move down the post-it notes for each of their components one by one. But that was in a hallway, so anytime somebody walked past the damn thing,
no way.
some post-it notes just flew off. So people would stop and look at the post-it note. I have no idea where that fits, so they just stuck it out
right back
somewhere and kind of walked away hoping nobody saw them. So we kind of looked at that and we were just laughing our butts off. And it got really bad. I mean, it got to a point where just about everything was falling behind schedule. One of the VPs came up to me and said, "Would you mind helping her?" And I said, "Are you kidding me? You take my job away without even so much by the way, a warning, something, thank you, whatever, pat on the back, on the head."
Yeah.
Nothing, and now you want me to go help this person because she can't do what I used to do day in and day out? What do you think I'm going to tell you? So that fell flat, and one happy day, my boss, he was the vice president of manufacturing, which, funny, that's where I belong in manufacturing. I wasn't. I was really in the creative, but that's okay. And he said, "Well, Russ, we'd like you to take over scheduling again the way you used to, and we're going to bump you up to director level."
Oh.
So, okay, that's nice. And I got a nice raise, and definitely a pat on the back. And do you think you can fix this? I said, I'll try. We'll see. Fix it in about a week. Hey, I knew the ropes. I had been doing that for so many years. I did that stuff in my sleep.
Yeah.
So I knew exactly what was going on. Got it fixed, and everything was fine. And this friend of Lorraine eventually got fired.
I take it the post-it notes probably didn't make it back into your...
No, they actually, that disappeared before then because we had this guy... he was a really sweet guy, very nice guy, but sometimes he was a little clumsy. So he was the janitor, and he had this big wooden cart that he used to haul all sorts of things around when he had to fix a wall or something in the building. Well, at one point, his cart hit the wall where that chart was.
Oh no.
And caused damage on the wall. So he had to fix the wall. So he very dutifully took one end of the chart and started rolling it halfway down, about 10 feet worth of the chart, taped it like that, and just went ahead and plastered the wall and repainted the wall, and the chart disappeared.
Oh, no.
It didn't survive. So, yeah, that was a funny event, let's put it this way.
Of all of your projects, and I know you've done a lot. You've done Dragonlance, you've done basic D&D, you've done the Gazetteers, you worked at first edition, second edition. What do you think your favorite product that you put together or actually developed yourself, what do you think your favorite project is or was?
Well, if you're talking about D&D, it has to be Gas 3. It's the Gazetteers.
Yeah, for sure.
Of course, but of course, right now my focus is completely outside of that area. I have my own product line. I'm an indie writer and publisher, and I work on the world of Calidar, which is kind of in the same spirit as Mistara and the Gazetteers. That's where my focus is, and that's what I'm having a ball with right now.
Because you don't have any constraints. You are your own boss. You don't have to worry about working with all these massive... I'm sure you probably have timelines and everything else, but not like you probably did, being at TSR.
As I discovered, there's a huge difference being an indie publisher and being a cog in a bigger company.
Yeah.
You see, at TSR, the big advantage is it's an inconvenience and an advantage. You have a whole lot of people who know a whole lot more about all the stuff involved in getting products out the door. So for art, I didn't have to think much. I just went to the art department and say, okay, we need this, or the editor did. When and the department would find either somebody in house or somebody out of house to produce the art and the cover and all that stuff. Yada yada yada. Okay, I didn't have to worry about this. Okay, I didn't have to worry about negotiating payments for artists. That was not my ball of wax. I didn't have to deal with keylining and typesetting and eventually later desktop publishing. I didn't have to do any of these things. But now, as a self-publisher, I have to know all these things and I have to do all these things, which means I can only work on one project at a time.
Yeah.
Not 15 or 20 or 30. It's not the same thing. It's a lot more complicated. Plus, you have to realize that after I left TSR, when TSR in Lake Geneva shut down, I didn't go to Renton because my ex at the time had a very good job down in the Chicago area. There was no way she was going to give it up. So I had to let TSR go. And there was a big void there. So I ended up working in different companies that had nothing to do with gaming. And I didn't really return to the industry until about 10 years later. And that's thanks to Janet, my companion, who took a pen and said, "I will stab you if you don't start writing stuff again." So, oh man, was I rusty. It was so hard just writing a short story. She was editing an anthology, and she said, "Oh, Bruce, you're writing a story." "I don't wanna." "You're writing an anthology. You're writing a story for the book." "I don't want it." "Yes, you are." "Oh, okay, dear." Oh boy. So boy, did I suffer going through this stuff and relearning the art of writing and stuff like that. Yeah, she heard that. But after that, I figured, all right, let's get back into writing. Well, what do I do best? And well, it's game stuff.
Yeah.
So I approached WotC and I said, well, I would like to either get permission or purchase the rights back to the Princess Ark, or do it under license, whatever works for you guys. So I can go ahead and write, new Princess Ark stories. And WotC wasn't going to let go of that.
Wow.
Excuse me.
Unfortunate.
Well, yes and no, because the flip side is I had to reinvent a new ship, a new story, a new crew, a new world for them to explore, just like the Princess Ark.
Yeah.
But that was mine. I didn't have to worry about having to show everything to, say, WotC, if I did that on license, for example.
Yeah.
I didn't have to walk up to WotC and say, okay, I wrote all this stuff, you need to approve it. And then wait.
And wait. Yeah.
Maybe nothing comes out of this. Or they say, we hate you, we don't like it, it's garbage, throw it away, start over. That would have been a real problem, and I don't think I would have really liked it. So yeah, it was a bitter pill to swallow not to be able to do more Princess Ark, but on the other hand, I get to do my own stuff now, and I'm certainly enjoying this a lot more. It's been a learning curve because after an absence of 10 years, during a period of time when the publishing industry went through all sorts of changes, especially technologically, when I got back into this, nothing was the same. I had to relearn absolutely everything. How do I get a book out, and how do I get it done? I mean, everything from top to bottom. So now I'm on DTRPG, so it's great because I don't have much of a risk, a personal financial risk. It's produced on demand. I don't have to worry about warehousing and shipping and all that stuff. That's all taken care of. It's difficult to make a living on that because print on demand is very expensive. But it's very flexible and it allows me to do what I like to do, so no complaints.
Yeah. So yeah, I need to get your, if you could email me your drive-through links, I'll go ahead and I'll put those into the video as well, so people can check out your product. So, and now let's talk about
You mean
what
this?
you've got going on. Yeah, exactly. Calidar.
Calidar, yes.
Yeah.
That's, as I said, it's basically a take on the Princess Ark, but structured as a D&D Gazetteer, Mystaran style.
Yeah.
So you have a core book that develops a particular setting. There's a story at the beginning, which is an episode of the Star Phoenix. It's a skyship that travels the world and has all sorts of adventures. Those guys don't remember who they are, or mostly where they came from. So they are forced to travel the world to try to gather clues about what happened to them and why they're in this world, and why they remember all of their skills, but they don't remember where they came from. So that's kind of the premise of the story. It's just an excuse, really, for them to go visit different countries, which in turn allows me to design a setting like the Gazetteers.
Yeah.
And I've just recently restructured the way Calidar products are lined up for several reasons. First off, because they're starting to add up right now, and it's a little bit hard to figure what goes with what. So now I do this by series. So series 1 is the first Gazetteer, the first adventure, the first player's guide, and a couple of conversion books, because Calidar is system agnostic. I looked at all the role-playing games. First off, I didn't want to deal with OGL at the time.
Yeah.
I just didn't know enough to get into this. I figured, all right, fine. I'm going to have to do something that's system neutral. But with time, I mean, people who really like Calidar can easily read through this and go, okay, yeah, I can adapt this to AD&D or basic D&D or whatever. It's not very difficult. But there are a number of people who really don't like doing this. So I came up with a way to convert all of the game stats from the original products, the adventure, the player's guide, and the core book. There's one booklet that comes out for Lablord, and another one for the Osric system. So that forms a series. That's what I call a series. So we have the first Gazetteer. The second Gazetteers is for Kaldwin. That's the Magiocracy. It's a little bit like Glantry in some ways, but there are a lot of new stuff in there. But also, once I get into Kickstarters, it's a lot easier for me to structure a Kickstarter with all these with the core product and its peripheral books, because they plug right into stretch goals.
Yeah.
But also they plug into the amount of crowdfunding, the total funds that are being pledged for the product. So if you have a lot, usually I have way more than the initial goal, I can include all of those books in the total, and it makes it easier for me to say, okay, you're a top tier bidder, you have everything in print, you're the next lowest bid, you get the core book in print and everything in PDF, and so on, as you go down to the lowest tier. So there are many reasons why I do this. So the next one, the first one was the home base for the Star Phoenix. The second one, as I said, was the Magiocracy. The third series will be about the elves. And the peculiarity about Calidar is that it has 3 moons. There's a moon where humans originated. The other moon is the elves, and the third moon is the dwarves. And they all compete to try to colonize as much of Calidar as they can. Calidar is a very dangerous place. It's most of it is covered by something called the Dreadlands, which is controlled by spirits of nature that rebel against foreign incursions. It's very dangerous. It's deadly. Well, fortunately, there's a spot in the middle of that whole planet on the surface where the Dreadlands have weakened. And of course, all of those races have flocked into there
Yeah.
and decided to colonize that spot. That became Calidar's known world. It's ring-shaped with a big mountain in the middle, which belongs to the dwarves, of course. So when I get into the Gazetteers, especially the Gazetteer for the elves, not only does this cover their colony in the known world, excuse me, it also will address the moon where they came from. So that's a little bit different from the Mystaran Gazetteers. Now you're talking about a place on Calidar and a moon.
Yeah.
And the next one will be the same way. It'll be the dwarves. They have their big mountains and a big mountain in the middle of the Great Caldera, which is the known world. And of course, they'll have their moon and so on and so forth. And then there are a few other planets. Calidar very much appeals to Spelljammer players because it's all about skyship, flying creatures, flying cities. I have a whole adventure in Series 1, which is a flying circus. So, of course, well, I had to do it that way because the central part of the story is about a skyship. So there's a skyship theme going on here.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I'm going with this.
Champions of Mystara box set, all about the skyships and everything. Beautiful box set.
Yeah, that was an amazing project, and Dupree did a fantastic job on this. The technical side came from Paul, her husband, who is very good with numbers. Let me put it this way. So the technical side of putting together game mechanics to build skyships and to make them work really completed this box set and made it really it covered all the ground that you needed covered, plus it had a gazetteer in there on top of everything else.
Yeah, plus it had all the maps of the ships and everything else. So
yes, and most of the Princess Ark stories gathered in one book, so that was nice too.
So you mentioned that with because I'm interested in Calidar. And with Calidar, you have the 3 moons. Now, when you did your first series, which involved the Star Phoenix, now was that part 1 where the humans and their moon, or do you still need to do that series after the elves and the dwarves still?
That hasn't been done yet. The first Gazetteer concentrated on presenting the game world as a whole, and it focused also on a small series of islands down south. It's a little bit like Urendi. It's where all the heroes go.
Gotcha.
But it didn't deal at all with the moon. The Munan, which is the moon for the humans, that will come through yet another Gazetteer later on, if I live long enough to write all this stuff. There is a big empire right next to Mariath, which is the islands, and that one will focus on the empire and the moon. And they actually really don't like the guys on the moon. They're absolutely sworn enemies.
Yeah, I'm gonna check out. I know that you had done a Kickstarter a couple of years ago. What, 2014 or 15 or something like that with Calidar?
14.
Yeah, I was just getting. I had took probably about a 10-year hiatus from gaming as well when the online craze came out with EverQuest and Dark Age of Camelot and Lord of the Rings Online and all those games. So yeah, a bunch of friends and I that we played D&D, we were like, oh man, this is cool. We don't have to roll dice anymore and you can see everything. And then we were like, we kind of miss rolling dice and everything. So so yeah, there was about 10 years. And when I had just after I had come back, I had seen that you had done a Kickstarter on Calidar, and I'm like, this sounds
what
interesting.
Is that?
Yeah, because I didn't recognize the name, but when you started talking about the Star Phoenix and everything, I was like, oh, this reminds me of the Dragon magazines and the articles and stuff from
of course
TSR. So
of course.
I always kind of wondered. I'm like, I guess he's probably not associated with TSR anymore, and he's not writing about the Ark and stuff. So.
Well, since practically 1999.
Yeah.
So that's been a while. Yeah.
So once you mentioned the Series 3 of the Elves. Do you have a date? When is that going to go to Kickstarter, or is that going to be a?
Yeah, I need to do the Kickstarter just to pay for the art.
Yeah.
Just to get a neat cover art. Normally,
And that's not cheap.
no, that's not cheap.
No.
And I already have Jeff Easley lined up for that one.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so I'm rubbing my hand. Besides, he doesn't live very far from here. He's like maybe 20, 25 minutes from where I am. So that's just going to make things a lot easier. So normally, barring any unforeseen disasters, Jeff should be working on the cover.
Awesome. Do you have a timeline on like when we could see that Kickstarter? Because I'm definitely gonna be interested.
Well, I like to get most of the stuff written before I do a Kickstarter.
Yeah.
First off, just to have a better understanding of what the product is. 132 page plus everything else I'm doing right now. That's going to take me some time. So Kickstarter, probably as early as February 2021. Not this year, because if I did it this year, it would fall right before the end of the year, probably November, and that becomes a tax problem because you get all this money in.
That's true.
And you don't have time to spend it.
Yeah.
So I did that once, and the maneuvering with the tax preparer to try to soften the blow was just a pain. I don't want to do that again. So that means I need to get my Kickstarter done and over with early in the year, so I have enough time to contract all of the art, to get the art, and to get everything, including the distribution of books. That's very expensive.
Yes.
Because, Kickstarter, that means that people get copies of books, which means you have to print them, you have to ship them. That's thousands of dollars then and there. Even though you only need a Kickstarter for the art, but because you
shipping is not cheap either.
It's a huge project, and of course, half of the people who buy my stuff are not in the States. They're in Canada, they're in Europe, they're in Asia, they're in Australia, they're all over the place. So shipping all this stuff becomes hugely expensive. So unfortunately, it feels like a sledgehammer to kill a fly, but that's.
But at least you don't have to deal with publishing houses anymore and getting approvals. You that's what I like about Kickstarter. It's almost, in a way, created a renaissance. This is how I envision it with my screwed up mind that I have. I envision the gaming industry going through a renaissance now where, the creators themselves, they don't have to worry about finding publishers and getting approvals for everything, and they can print their games. Mm-hmm. When 20, 30 years ago, they couldn't have done that. No. And I'm so thankful for that, because there's so many good games out there. There's so many good games, just not the big companies anymore.
Correct, but it's also very tough to be able to fight for a space on the shelves, or just to get the attention, because there's so much good stuff out there. Mm-hmm. It's difficult. I just posted this picture right here. I'm kind of getting out of the way. Okay, this is Calidar, the world, and this here, the round thing in the middle toward the top of the planet, that's the known world. That's the Great Caldera. And then the three moons, the human first, the elven next, the dwarven third. And then there's this red planet over my shoulder. And that's Mars. And Mars, in the world of Calidar, is called Lao Kui. It's actually a Chinese setting set on something that looks like Mars. Oh. It's dry, it's red, there's no water, but it has a moon. As you can see right by my right elbow there, there's a moon that's called Kumoshima. These are the Japanese. And of course, they've got all the water of the planet. So there is a huge rivalry between Lao Kui and Kumoshima. As Lao Kui says, you stole all our water. And Kumoshima says, no, we didn't. But it doesn't matter where it came from. It's ours now. You can't have it.
Oh, boy.
And Lao Kui, the reason why it's a desert is it used to belong 1,000 years earlier to an alien race, the Kahulkin. And the Kahulkin fought a war, and they essentially blew themselves up. So they left all of those artifacts all over the place, including rings in space, which skyships can use to travel from one planet to the next. But these are forgotten artifacts. We're never too sure if they're going to work or whether they're going to cause some real problems or malfunction entirely. So that's kind of what's down the road from there. And of course, there's another planet that doesn't correspond to anything. It's called Draconia, which is a hollow world. That's actually, it's more like Mercury. It's the world of the dragon, evil dragons mostly. They have the ability to use treasure, gems, gold, stuff like that, magic, whatever, and they can burn that in order to create magic. So that's the reason why dragons are always looking for treasure, why they're hoarding all this stuff. Well, they actually use it. It's fuel for them. And with that, they maintain their hollow world, because otherwise it would fall apart. They can also power skyships. So they have an order of draconic knights that they send all over the place looking for, you guessed, treasure.
Yeah, because they got to keep the fuel going. I like that idea, because that, you always see these, dragons with these huge chambers of treasure, and what do they do with it? I like that.
They wait for the next. They wait for the next draconic skyship to show up, so they can haul all that stuff on the skyship, send it back to Draconia to the living queen, the living goddess. They have a living goddess in there, black dragon. Meanwhile, on the islands of Marieth, which is the year-endy kind of thing, you have a specialty, which is dragon slaying. These guys like to go around and steal treasures from dragons. That's
Gazetteers. There you go. Yeah,
that's what they do. So of course they're at war against the dragons.
I love those little stories within a world. I like that.
There's plenty of that in Calidar. There are all sorts of connections. Marieth, the Series 1, focuses on something called Eternal Glory, which is about epic heroes and how epic heroes gain notoriety, and using the idea that as long as you're not forgotten, you're never truly dead. Using this sort of logic, when you accumulate notoriety points, you stop aging. And as long as you keep on earning notoriety points, you do not age. If you get to that point, you become an epic hero. If you become an epic hero, you're tough enough, at least in a group of epic heroes, to take out at least a demigod. This is how powerful these guys can get. So now the epic heroes are in contact with the gods, and the gods are either telling them what to do, I like you, this particular epic hero, I think you should worship me, and if you worship me, I will reward you, but you're also going to have to do things for me, because I'm not allowed to go in the world of mortals, right?
Yeah.
So eventually they can become demigods themselves, and perhaps if they, exist long enough, they might become gods themselves. So there's a whole dichotomy there.
Yeah.
The relation between the gods, demigods, mortals, epic heroes. And all of this connects to something called the world soul. And the world soul is basically life. It's magic. In other words, magic is life and life is magic. Everything that is alive on the planet draws its soul from the world soul. All the spells that you cast are also drawn from the world soul. The gods themselves have earned all of their power from the world soul, so they're bound to a particular world. Okay, they're not all over the place. What happens with this is there's an effect on Calidar that makes things become real if enough people believe them. It's the reason why epic heroes don't age. It's because people think of them as being immortal, literally, so therefore the epic heroes don't die. But if you have enough humans to think, really, it'd be cool if we had a god of mimics.
Yeah.
Okay, if you have enough people who think that, the World Soul is going to create a god of mimics. So in other words, all of the pantheons of deities in Calidar have been created by mortals. They don't know it. They just believe in stuff, and stuff happens.
That's awesome.
It's a little bit like Forbidden Planet, that old movie, remember?
Yeah. Oh,
Leslie Nielsen?
Yeah.
That's kind of where this goes. And then, of course, there's the Gulian orcs. There's a separate dimension that constructed, or you have like Cthulhu-like type gods there, and they have millions of orcs and trolls and ogres and all sorts of nasty creatures. And what they did is build this planet, which is in fact a giant dungeon. It's bare on the outside, it's frozen on the outside, but the inside is nothing but a giant dungeon with millions of orcs. And what they did is take this world and cast it into the universe of Calidar. And once in a while, this planetoid shows up near Calidar, or near the other planets, Laugway, Draconia possibly. And you have millions of orcs that can travel the short distance between that planet and, say, Calidar, for example, in order to raid the world for treasure, of course, but also to gather millions of slaves. Well, they're not slaves, really. They're prisoners. And, of course, their planet, Guel, continues to gravitate. So eventually, after raiding everything on the planet as they can, they take off, they go back to their artificial world. The planet continues, eventually goes back to the universe whence it came.
Oh, wow.
Well, what they do with all their captives is they feed the gods with them.
Oh, boy. So it's the opposite of the dragons needing treasure for fuel. The orcs, they need humanoids. They need life.
They need lives. And they feed them to the gods, because if they don't, they feed the gods.
And they don't want to feed themselves to the gods.
So that's motivation for the orcs, right?
Yeah, that's when you push your friend in front of you. Oops, as he falls forward into the feeding pit.
Yeah, right, exactly. So there's the equivalent of deities and demigods that I came up with for Calidar, which is actually a really big book. It's like 240 pages or whatever, printed in tiny print, because I overwrote it. Bad boy.
Well, when you're really into something, it's so easy to go. It's like when I write my adventures too. I'm like, okay, this is going to be a 1-page adventure, front and back, and that's it. It ends up being 3 or 4. But then again, being a history major, it's hard for me not to do that, because I just love the details of everything. That's a problem that I have. So
being a perfectionist also causes a lot of problems, because you can't let go of stuff unless it's exactly the way you want it. Yeah. You never can end anything this way. So I started out with a particular format and then multiplied it for all of the pantheons, because each race has its own pantheon, of course, or 2 or 3. So I ended up with almost 100 gods.
Oh my goodness.
And they're all detailed. They all have their mythology, and they all have extra information for the clerics and what to do with them and stuff like that.
Not just pages of stat blocks like the old, monster. I love that, especially with the information on the actual god or deity. Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, I published a lot of information in my blog just recently, actually, the past couple of months, about Eternal Glory, Epic Heroes, Demigods, and Gods. I just pushed the Gods article yesterday, and there'll be one more article in this arc that'll come out next week. Awesome. That what it does, because the gods, I had assumed that the gods would never meet the mortals, therefore I didn't need any stats for them. Plus, the book was supposed to be stats neutral anyway.
Yeah.
So there were no stats for the gods. So I wrote the article and said, okay, I'm going to give you some stats for the gods, which is only for the purpose of figuring how strong they are relative to each other, and how strong their cults are on the planet, and also how this plugs into the concept of immortals in basic D&D, BSCMI. Yeah, so now we have stats for gods too. So there we go.
That's all. That was one of the first things that I noticed about Calidar was the system agnostic part of it.
Hmm.
Because I've written a couple of adventures as well, and I didn't want to be locked in with one type of game. So with my adventures, I'll say, okay, if you're playing this type of game, then you can do this, or if you're playing the so doing stuff with a system agnostic type of format, I think it gives the players more, because if they'll say, oh, okay, this is just for D&D or this is for Pathfinder, then they'll shy away from it. But if you advertise it as system agnostic and you can put it into any of your game, and I've seen where you have your conversion stuff as well for Pathfinder and everything else, which is wonderful. So that was one thing that I did like about Calidar, was the system agnostic, and plus being a huge BECMI fan, BECMI, or however you want to say it, that just fits perfect, because you can always travel the planes. And I don't want to give out any spoilers, but with my game, because I'm running a basic D&D game now, we're doing B1. So I plan on doing B1 and then doing B2 and then going to X1, because they should be about level 5 by then. So, I'll torment them with a bunch of, dinosaurs and stuff. But then after that, I planned on giving them a starship and starting, I was going to start doing planar travel and stuff, because they'll be a little bit higher level. They could handle that a little bit better. So yeah, that's what I'm probably going to start incorporating some Calidar into my games. So
one other thing about Calidar that's really neat, and a reason why it caught a lot of attention from people, is the quality of the maps. And
the art is beautiful.
The maps, the geographic maps, I owe a huge thank you to Thorfinn Tate, who does all of those geographic maps. Sometimes he even does posters, like this one, for example. It shows
amazing.
All of the planets. Okay, so using
the detail. Wow.
The background is actually an image from NASA, but he did all the other planets. He's very good at doing these things. I don't know how he does those, but I'm glad he does. But he does maps like this. Okay, that's
beautiful.
That's part of Mariath. How about this one here?
Yeah,
this one shows. Yeah, that's all the climate zones, the direction of the winds, sea currents, and whatnot. Let's see. Here's the Great Caldera. That's the known world.
Yeah, the known world.
And I think I forgot to get a hex map, but all of these maps are available in standard D&D hex format, with the little symbols and whatnot, exactly like this stuff, from Gazetteers. Well, that's what he does as well, in addition to topographical maps like this.
Those are beautiful.
These maps are beautiful, and on top of that, Thorfinn also is the person who puts together the books. So he'll gather all of my text, all of the maps, all of the art that I get from the artists, and puts the book together and somehow makes it all fit. And I'm so glad he does that, because I got no idea how to do it. I know how many words I have. I use an Excel sheet that calculates how much space I have for each of the chapters. Therefore, I know how many words theoretically should fit, given that I want so many illustrations, so many maps, etc. But the reality is, once that gets turned over and you start putting that in desktop publishing, you really start fitting things together. Text is either going to be long or it's going to be short. There's always something that doesn't fit quite right. Yeah. And he's got a true talent at adjusting everything, somehow making it work. So,
that's a good thing.
That's and it's the same guy all the time. So to me,
it's consistency as well.
There's consistency, but also for me to work with Thorfinn, it's a lot easy. It's very easy because it's the same guy. We know each other. We've been working together for years. Even before Calidar, he and I used to put together updated maps for Mystara on my blog. And I started doing this using another software, and it wasn't always very accurate. So knowing Thorfinn, he looked at that and he went, "That's not correct." And so he would take it and do it right with his software, which just looks absolutely perfect. He'd hand it back to me, and I put it back on the blog and be happy.
Yeah. It's important to have good cartography, in my opinion. Maps and of your world, and that was one thing that when I was in the process of making my world, that was one thing that I was really worried about, because I'm no artist. I can barely draw a stick figure. So, yeah, having, especially with now a nice image too, especially with technology now and all of these map making programs, it makes things so much easier, man.
But to do it right, it's still a lot of work. I mean, I
is.
spent months on floor plans myself. I've learned a lot in the past 5 years. And here's an example of a floor plan that I've put together for the adventure that connects with the Magiocracy. That's How to Train Your Wizard. It's all about low-level wizards trying to get their first diploma, because now you have diplomas. In order to, you have to graduate in order to go up levels and whatnot. So there's this big school that's all that is detailed. Every professor, every creature that dwells in the school.
And that doesn't happen in RPGs, and I like that. With your courses and diplomacy. There was one other book that I remember, something like that. It was I believe it was the Sorcerer's Guide from Talislanta. And it described the college and all the courses you can take, the instructors, the benefits, I like that kind of stuff. There again, that goes back to me being a history major and loving all of the details. But yeah, good stuff.
And it's very much in the spirit of Gazetteers. That's what we love to do. To have all that detail, all that color, all the maps, decent art, and so on, that comes from that school. So I'm continuing the tradition.
So I have a question for you. Are you running any games currently, or are you playing in any games as just a player?
Right now, no. I really don't have a whole lot of time for gaming. Big surprise. If I do play games, it's only along the lines of playtest.
Yeah.
So if I do that, that's going to be in the local library with a few friends in the area, and that's about it. I used to game regularly about a couple of years back. There's a club in the area that gathers weekly, and I used to go there a lot. But first off, it does eat up an entire day, and most of the time I don't want to do that. Plus, there's all sorts of good food, and that's really bad news for me. So. Goodbye.
So how can everyone find your products? And like I said, I'll get all of your links from you as well, and I'll post it in the video that I'm going to put on YouTube. So how can everybody find you on Drive-Thru RPG, your Calidar website, etc.?
Well, on Drive-Thru is very easy. You just type up Calidar in the search box, and you'll find me. If you want to know about all the other stuff I do, that's related to Calidar, go on Google, just type Bruce Hurd Calidar, and you'll find all sorts of things. I mean, I run a chat group on Facebook, World of Calidar. I have a page on Facebook. I have a blog. I'm also on Twitter. I'm also on MeWe. Lately, I've been putting stuff on Reddit, and I forgot what else.
Well, I'll get all those links on the description for you.
So, yeah, for the blog, it's easy. It's Bruce-Hurd at blogspot.com, I think. No, blogspot.com. Blah, that's a mouthful.
So do you want to take a couple of questions from the live audience that we have? I've got a couple of questions if you're okay with them.
Why not? Let's go ahead and try. If you hear me running away, you'll know.
So Belle has asked, what is your favorite book that you have ever read?
Dune.
Dune?
The Dune trilogy, the original one.
Very good.
But that would also be very, very close with Lord of the Rings. There are a lot of books.
That's
actually
what my dad got me into. He got me The Hobbit and then Lord of the Rings, and then from there my mind just expanded and D&D just fit within that reality, and I was like, oh, this is the best ever. So someone was always asking, will Bruce ever want to be a guest player for a session in one of David's games?
Well, that's possible now that we figured out how to make this thing work,
Yeah.
the audio and all that stuff. I've never done it before. Maybe it's time to do it, why not?
No, I could have you come in and when I introduce Calidar to my players.
I knew you were going to ask that. I looked at all the stuff that you have on Discord, and I figured, yeah, okay, I know where this is going. Okay, no problem.
Let's see. There is a question from Rilvis. He was asking if you were possibly a military brat as a kid, and did that affect your involvement in games, if that was the case?
Well, my dad was in the Navy. I spent 2 years in Morocco while he was based in Morocco for the U.S. Navy. But that really didn't have anything to do with gaming. I was a kid. I was back in the 60s, so I was like a 10-year-old. But after that, no, because when I started going, I was old enough to go on vacation to the States from France. He had already retired from the Navy, so there's no connection there.
Gotcha.
Not that I can see.
Someone was asking, does Torfin have a website?
He does. He does, and if you Google Torfin maps, I think you will find it. Let me check real quick to see if I can get an actual... He's got a Patreon account, and if I click on this thing right here, I should be able to find the address. Yes, it is patreon.com/Torf, THORF.
All right. I will also add that in there as well.
Okay.
A couple of people have mentioned, oh my God, no post notes, please. No post-it notes. I guess I used to have all of my monitors just covered with post-it notes. And just like you had mentioned, I had my ceiling fan on, and my ceiling fan was powerful enough to blow them away. And I had them all organized, and I just gave up on the whole post-it notes thing. So
that's funny.
Yeah. Oh, I must have had at one point probably 100 post-it notes on 4 different monitors. It was a train wreck, believe me. Let's see. I think that's it.
It's a post-it.
Yeah. No more for me. They're still on my desk, and I haven't thrown them away yet. So, well, Bruce, I really appreciate you coming on. It's the time has just flown by, and it's been an honor to have you on. And
it was my pleasure.
Really
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
Everybody, Bruce Hurd, the iconic Bruce Hurd. So we'll see everybody next time for the next Digital Dungeon Master stream. And until next time, everybody, I'm David, and this is Bruce, and I'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Ta-ta for now.